1927-28 must have been a very interesting time for Eric Cole. Eric Kirkham Cole, in fact. He lived in Southend. He lived there at a time when thousands upon thousands of bungalows, small cottages, small buildings were being built. And as they were being built, mains electricity was being installed. And after a while, people from London and the home counties started moving into these places and bringing with them their decrepit battery wireless sets that they'd used at home. And Eric Cole thought that if he could make a mains unit that would drive these old radios off the new mains electricity, he could make a living. So he produced this little box of tricks that would take the place of a HT battery. He then went round on his bicycle and knocked on every door that had a house that had an aerial in the garden and offered them a mains unit for their set. And he could manage to sell all that he could make. But on his travels he realised that people weren't getting very good reception down there. There was interference from foreign stations, from the Kurzel, from the trains that chugged up and down the pier, from the trolley buses and the trams. And it was pretty dreadful reception. He felt if he could design a wireless set that would work in Southend, he would make a killing. It would work anywhere in the world. So he did. He and a chap called Roy Verrills, I think his name was, developed this set. A nice, chunky main set in a wooden box, reasonably priced. It would actually use the loudspeaker off their old battery set if they wanted it to. And they were absolute wonderful success. And he started to make money, but he wasn't making very much because an awful lot of money were going into the cabinets. And then he hunted around and heard about the works of Dr. Bakerland, a Belgian physicist or scientist who was working for the AEG company in Germany and had developed a substance called Bakelite, which was basically phenolic resin, wood flour and formaldehyde under great pressure and great heat came out of a mould, all ready, polished and shaped. And he got onto him and asked for cabinets, and they were very pleased to oblige and started sending him in cabinets like these. Not very solid, but they were cheap and they could be supplied in large quantities. And at last he started to make money, good money. And then he got a tap on the shoulder from the Board of Trade. He says, of course you realise you're buying from the Germans, the Board of Trade said. They haven't had terribly good press in the last few years. It's not very patriotic, is it? So he said, no, I suppose not. What else am I to do? He says, well, buy the machinery from AEGs in Germany, set it up in Southend, bring employment to a depressed area, and carry on making your cabinets here. He says, what am I going to use for money? He says, right, the banks, the British government, industry, they'll back you. And they were good as they were, and they did. And these enormous presses the size of houses came to Southend and were set up. He started pressing out cabinets. He started with this model. He thought, this is good. It sold well, sold all he could make. He thought, well, this stuff Bakelite, this is not more than just a substitute for wood. You can do things with it. You can make different shapes. And so he started looking around and found there was quite a few architects and designers in the country looking for work. People like Wells Coates, Serge Mayeff, A.K. White, Misha Black, to name but a few. So we held little competitions. They came up with different shapes. So we ended up with all these wonderful different shapes and designs. And he'd got a big factory, employing an awful lot of people. He very soon ran out of people. Things got too big. Folk had gone down to Southend to flog deck chairs and ice cream and run boarding houses and whatever, and gone down there to make wireless sets, not during the summer anyway. So he closed his factory down during the summer and rehired them all in the autumn and got his production line going. He was their hero. Working conditions, I believe, are diabolical. wages absolutely foul, but of course he could have a wireless set at half price if he wanted it. But he was a very humane, kind man. He would be at the gate of the factory when we arrived in the morning, and he'd be there to say good night to them when we went home at night. He was their hero, and produced a first-class wireless set in a nice cabinet, which few other manufacturers could do. With most of them, as I said earlier, it was either a nice cabinet or a nice set, but not both, not unless you paid through the nose for it. Eric Cole managed it at a reasonable price. He had gone on doing so if it hadn't been for a drowning accident in 1966 when he came to his end in the Bahamas. After that, the firm collapsed, and that was the end of Eric Kirkham Cole. Thank you.